Hey, what's going on, everybody? Hope you are doing good. I want to go ahead and get started with our verse of the week. Our verse of the week this week is going to be in Second Timothy. Go ahead and pull it up. Second Timothy, chapter 2, verse 4. It says, "No one engaged in warfare entangles himself with the affairs of this life, that he may please him who enlisted him as a soldier." So that is our verse of the week, 2 Timothy 2:4. And it's got a lot to do with just making sure that we don't get caught up in this world. When I think about what does this verse mean, we've been enlisted into this warfare. We read in Ephesians chapter 6 that our battle is not against flesh and blood. It's against principalities. It's against the rulers of the darkness and unseen spiritual things that are going on in the heavenlies. There's an unseen war that's going on and that's taking place, and we all need to be aware of it so that we can be ready, be vigilant in everything that we do. And in this warfare, we recognize that we're not to battle against flesh and blood. We're not to battle against human beings. At all times, we got to recognize when we're dealing with people, whether they're difficult people or whatever the case may be, that people are not our enemy. And so we have to recognize that every time we argue with people, if we choose, should we choose and should we decide to argue with people, we'll be losing the battle already. It's a lost cause when we call ourselves Christians to fight against flesh and blood. And so if we keep that in mind, we won't stumble and fall and begin to fight against people the way we would before we were born again, before we were saved. And so as we continue this walk with God, we learn more and more how to fight this spiritual battle and how to avoid fighting against flesh and blood. Now, we're going to be taking a look today at a lot of things that are pretty, they go pretty deep into the darkness that has come into our world. And we're going to take a look at some people who unfortunately have made it their goal in life to bring evil into the world. And so as we look at that, we're going to see how this has affected. We'll look back at some of the things we already talked about, but we'll definitely look into more, because we're talking about why is it that we're all, as a nation, so depressed? Why are so many people depressed? Why are so many people feeling this heaviness, this anxiety, this fear? I'm making the argument week after week that the things that we take in are affecting us. And we start to see, is it true that the things that we take in affect us? And if so, what are we taking in? And what influences the things that we take in? Not only how is it influencing us, but what is influencing the things that we're seeing in our life, in our world today. The music that we're hearing, the shows that we're seeing, all these kinds of things. We want to look and see what influences, in other words, what influences the influencers, and people may be shocked and surprised to hear some of what we're going to see and what we're going to come across as we look into some of these things. Now, I want to share another verse in First Kings that will help us to see an example of somebody in the Bible. First Kings 21:25, it says, "But there was no one like Ahab who sold himself to do wickedness in the sight of the Lord, because Jezebel, his wife, stirred him up." Now, here's a man who the Bible says is wicked and evil. It says he sold himself to do wickedness. Not only sold himself to do wickedness, but to do so in the sight of the Lord. So he had no regard for God, no fear of God. He wasn't afraid to go against what God had ordered and had designed. He wasn't afraid to go against God's will. He had no fear of God. And so we're going to look at that kind of spirit that is in the world and is still alive and well in our world right now. And so as we look at that, we need to recognize that there's a spirit behind all this that's taking place. That this is like I mentioned a moment ago, it is a spiritual battle. It is a spiritual thing. It's not just these people. There's something more to this than what meets the eye. And so the first thing that I wanted to do was, if you're not familiar with this person, I want to have be the one to introduce you to this person, so that we can understand where so much of this influence has come from. Whenever we hear later on that others were influenced by this person, we'll understand who this person is and what he was about. Because we can hear this man's name. You may have heard of it already. You may hear this person was influenced by Aleister Crowley. You may not know exactly what that means as far as what was influencing Aleister Crowley. So that's what we're going to take a look at. And the reason for it is, as we'll see, this person was a huge influence. And that is why we're beginning now in this video to we're beginning with this video in order to see what influence this person had, and again, what was influencing him.
Few people realize that Aleister Crowley is not only the father of modern Satanism, but the father of modern culture as well. Crowley, whose house overlooked Loch Ness and was bought by guitarist Jimmy Page, has for good reason also been called the other Loch Ness Monster. Crowley, who in his book Magic had admitted to sacrificing hundreds of children to Satan, was run out of Italy and called by the press of his day the wickedest man on earth. Crowley claimed that a demonic spirit he later identified as Satan himself dictated a book to him in 1904 called the Book of the Law. Under the heading The Law of Thelema, the Book of the Law declares, "This book lays down a simple code of conduct. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is a law, love under will. There is no law beyond do what thou wilt." Echoing Satan's arrogant boast, "I will exalt my throne above the stars of God," the book centers around the imposition of satanic self-will in defiance of divine will. Aleister Crowley, elaborating on the satanic doctrine of do what thou wilt, declared, quote, "I say today, to hell with Christianity. I will build me a new heaven and a new earth. I want blasphemy, murder, rape, revolution, anything bad, etc." As we shall see, Crowley's do what thou wilt was really do what Satan or Crowley wilt. Crowley taught that one could become a genius in music through practicing his Satanism.
So that's one thing I wanted to stop and point out for a minute, to see what he taught.
Genius.
It says Crowley taught that one could become a genius in music through practicing Satanism. This was something that he wrote about. So Aleister Crowley, we'll learn more about him, about this unfortunate soul as we go along. But this is one of the things that he taught, and he was very influential. His reach was widespread, and he had a lot of influence in our world. And he continues to have an influence in our world to this day, even though he's been deceased for quite a while now. But this is one of the things that he taught in one of his books. Again, he was a Satanist. He was an occultist. He practiced a form of black magic, mysticism. And he taught that if you want to become a genius in music and not, have to, or if you want to rise to the level of fame and prominence that many people do, that you can do that through practicing his brand, if you will, his form of Satanism. So that's a big thing to keep in mind as we continue here.
In music through practicing his Satanism. Many rock stars have become famous through practicing Aleister Crowley's Satanism. Ozzy Osbourne, seen here bearing an inverted cross, is only one of many rock stars who have promoted Crowley's Satanism. Ozzy Osbourne has stated that Crowley was, quote, a phenomena of his time.
So I don't want to play the song itself, but Ozzy Osbourne wrote a song, and it was a famous song all about Mr. Crowley, or all about Aleister Crowley, which is named Mr. Crowley. So if you knew Black Sabbath back in those days, Ozzy Osbourne and his band, then you heard this song. It was a huge song at one point in time, and it's still definitely people know it to this day. But just to look at a couple of the lyrics. We're not gonna look at all of them, but to see what he's saying in this song. He talks about Mr. Crowley and did you talk to the dead and stuff like that in the beginning. But here he says, your lifestyle to me seems so tragic with the thrill of it all. You fooled all the people with magic. Yeah, you waited on Satan's call. So here Ozzy Osbourne in his song is saying you fooled all the people with magic. What kind of magic? The kind of black magic that he practiced. Here, these lyrics that were influenced by the devil himself, that were given to Ozzy Osbourne and the rest of his band, revealed to us the reality of what Aleister Crowley was doing. He was fooling the people of our nation and of the world with his magic, with his satanic magic. And we'll see a little bit more about that later on. But here at another portion, it says, "Mr. Crowley, won't you ride my white horse?" Mr. Crowley, it's symbolic, of course. And again, I just don't believe that those came from the mind of this person known as Ozzy Osbourne. I believe these are given by the devil himself. And there's many musicians in the past and present have talked about how they channel lyrics. That lyrics just come to them. They may be asleep and wake up from a dream, or maybe not from a dream, but just from a dead sleep, either one. And they just pick up a pencil and they just begin to write, and it just flows from there. Or others have talked about just sitting somewhere feeling uninspired, and all of a sudden a dark presence comes into the room and they just begin to write. They begin to channel these lyrics. So it's not at all uncommon. But look at what's being said. Won't you ride my white horse? We know that the Antichrist is going to be coming in the book of Revelation on a white horse. At one time, he's going to be imitating Jesus Christ, who comes on a white horse also. But the Antichrist comes in place of Christ, which is what Antichrist means. And here you see that symbolism. And he says, "Won't you ride my white horse?" And Mr. Crowley, it's symbolic, of course. So what's he saying? He's saying we're paying homage to this Satanist who called himself the Beast. He was all about Antichrist. And that's another thing that we need to keep in mind when it comes to what we're going to be talking about in the future. Antichrist and the spirit of Antichrist. The Word of God tells us the spirit of Antichrist is already in the world. And so it's the reason we're talking about all these things when it comes to depression, is because the influence and the connection between what we take in our minds, we allow to our heart through believe. When we listen to music that's demonically influenced, that is going to have a terrible effect on us. And so that's why I want to expose what's going on in music, so much of what people don't know. And I want to expose a lot of singers specifically, to say, look at who they were influenced by, and look at what the plan was all along. There's an evil plot and plan that's been in place, and it's still in place to this day. I want people to be aware of it. I don't want people to be ignorant of Satan's devices, especially when it's right there in front of us. This information is there, but few people take the time to look and see, what is music really all about, and what is it that's influencing musicians. So again, what are we doing right now? We're talking about this man, Aleister Crowley. So I want to continue here and see a little bit more about what his ideas were, what he wanted to accomplish in his life.
Aleister Crowley has been called the unsung hero of the 1960s and the father of the New Age movement. Time magazine, on their front page article on the New Age movement, declares that they don't know where the term came from or where the movement is going. But the evidence is all so clear for those who have eyes to see and ears to hear. In Crowley's book, The Book of the Law, the spirit of Satan who channeled through him wrote of the coming of the new eon, a transliteration of the Greek word ionis for age. The book declares how this new eon of Horus will develop, how the child will grow up. These are for us to determine, growing up ourselves in the way of the law of Thelema under the enlightened guidance of the Master Therion. And just who is the Master Therion that is to guide the new age? At the end of the book, we discover that Therion equals 666, the number of the Antichrist, the one whom the Bible calls the man of lawlessness, the man of sin, who is to reign during the last period of history in the tribulation period and to be destroyed after he deceives the world by Christ at Armageddon.
So there you see one of his books, The Book of the Law, and one of his one of the things that he's trying to get across in the Book of the Law is this thing called the New Age. And I know y'all have heard me talk about the New Age, and most people have no idea that it originated, or not fully originated with this man, but he was a part of bringing the foundation to the world, this evil Satanist. So things that are New Age, things that line up with New Age, this is the root. This is the foundation of it. That as far as modern society and modern culture goes, it's been around since the beginning. This upside down inversion of who God is, where, you know, God is the one who wants to keep you from having fun, but Satan wants to reveal to you that you can be God. And that has been a teaching since the beginning that the enemy has put into the world. And now here it comes from this evil Satanist named Aleister Crowley, who only wanted to do evil. And we haven't even scratched the surface of how wicked and evil this man was just in his life. The things that he claims to have done are beyond disgusting and evil and pure wicked. But again, you think, why are we talking about this man? Who is this? What does this have to do with depression? What does this have to do with music? Again, if you stay with me, as the weeks go by, you'll see it all come together. So we're going through sort of still laying the foundation, like I told y'all last week. In a short live video, I can't even begin to scratch the surface. And so we're still scratching that surface right now. But let's see a little bit more on this.
In Crowley's book, Magic, which he spelled with his characteristic.
Okay, just for a second. Remember what the song from Ozzy Osbourne said, right? You fooled the world with your magic. Talking about Aleister Crowley, your magic, and he spells it with a K because that was one of his things to sort of set apart. This is something different. This ain't card tricks. This ain't sleight of hand. This isn't a game. This isn't a toy. This isn't an illusion. This isn't something for entertainment. His idea was, no, this is real deal black magic that causes things to happen in the spiritual realm that become a reality in our world.
K at the end. It states, quote, Crowley's magic is a doctrine and a technique for establishing contact with extraterrestrial entities, spirits, demons. The whole of Crowley's doctrine is based on the Book of the Law, in which the future of humanity, the establishment on earth of a new order is.
So there again, you see his doctrine is about getting into contact with extraterrestrial entities, spirits, and demons. And again, what is it that he wants to do? Establish on earth, the establishment on earth of a new order. And what is that new order? It's doing away with Christianity and bringing the world together as one, just like is detailed in the book of Revelation, what is going to happen. So this man Crowley wanted to be the Antichrist. You know, he considered himself to be the beast. That was what his whole life was about.
Is outlined. A large part of Satan's plan through Crowley was to bring in a drug revolution and to open up the masses to the demonic spirit world. Crowley's former disciple and secretary, Israel Regardie, stated, quote, Crowley became an expert at a dozen or so varieties of Hindu and Buddhist yoga. He experimented with more drugs more frequently than anybody in the West before the neurological revolution of the 1960s.
So again, let me stop just for a minute and talk about what he just said there. Crowley became an expert at a dozen or so varieties of Hindu and Buddhist yoga. So, you know, yoga is something that is practiced in Hinduism and Buddhism. It's not something that is just stretching. It's not just exercise. Yoga means to yoke. That's what that word means. And so when you do yoga, you're yoking yourself together. In other words, you're connecting yourself to entities, to Hindu gods, Buddhist gods, and the Word of God tells us that the gods of the world are demons. And so you'll see, if you look for it, you could find pictures of Aleister Crowley posing in different yoga, whatever you call those things. I can't think of the word right now. Poses, yoga poses. I said the word poses, but you can see him posing in these yoga poses, and it's something that connects you with demons. Meditation, the kind that they practice, is the same thing. And these things are brought into churches sometimes, but it's not something that is just like, oh, it's exercise or it can help you out. No, it's practicing a religion. And it says he experimented with more drugs more frequently than anybody in the West before the neurological revolution of the 1960s. In other words, he wanted to bring drugs into this world because he's experimenting with drugs through this magic that he's putting out into the world, saying you can become a musical genius through doing these things. And he so, you know, for people who say, oh, you know, it's just a little weed, you know, it comes from the earth, you know, you may think it's a joke, but I guarantee you it's not. So anybody who takes that lightly may want to reconsider and think about the consequences of opening your mind up to these demonic entities, because that's precisely what you're doing when you smoke marijuana or do any other drugs. I say marijuana because it's one that people think is, you know, no big deal, but they all are a big deal.
Before the neurological revolution of the 1960s. In the Book of the Law, the satanic spirit that channeled through Aleister Crowley merely echoes the satanic strains from the Garden of Eden so many years ago. He states, quote, I am the snake that giveth knowledge and delight and bright glory and stir the hearts of men with drunkenness to worship me, take wine and strange drugs.
So he says, the snake, the devil, is writing this through Aleister Crowley. He's channeling these words from the other side. And he makes this statement, in order to worship me, this is the devil talking, saying, if you want to worship me, take wine and strange drugs. That's what's coming from Satan to Aleister Crowley that he wrote in his book, the Book of the Law, in 1976. And you can find these words in page 37 to 38. That's how specific this is. It says it right here on the bottom of this right here. So it's taken straight from him. And again, you're going to see, well, is there anything to this? That's what we're going to see in a little while. But keep these things in mind because they're going to be important. So, okay, he's saying these things, but is there anything to it? Because that's what really matters. Well, we're going to find out. But let's finish up this.
Stir the hearts of men with drunkenness to worship me, take wine and strange drugs. Crowley interpreted this in his book Diary of a Drug Fiend to mean, quote, things like heroin and alcohol may be and should be used for the purpose of worshiping, that is, entering into communion with the snake that giveth knowledge. And
so again, things like heroin and alcohol may be and should be used for the purpose of what? Worshiping. That is entering into communion. It's amazing, the words. Communing with the snake that gives knowledge. What did the snake say to do? What did the serpent say to do in the garden to Eve, right? If you take of that, the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, take of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, then you'll become like God. So again, it's the same thing being echoed through this man's writings. This is through his book called Diary of a Drug Fiend. Gives knowledge and delight, and he says bright glory.
Delight and bright glory. Aleister Crowley's twisted poetry glorified drugs as a door to the demonic. He wrote, quote, "Stab your demoniac smile to my brain. Soak me in cognac, love, and cocaine. Heart on my heart, come out of the rain. Let's have another go of cocaine. Always go on till you have to stop. Let's have another sniff over the top." Robert Anton Wilson, who played a leading role in the counterculture revolution of the 1960s, stated in his book, Sex and Drugs, quote, "Crowley played a decided role in developing the philosophy or mystique of the drug revolution."
So the whole drug and sex revolution that we hear about, that how this took place, when did that begin? It was through what they called the hippies, right? The hippies came, the music changed. We looked at last week how the Beatles came and brought a revolution. We're going to see a little bit more from the Beatles here also, but in this video. But what happened, this revolution, well, who's the forerunner to that revolution? This man right here. None other than Satanist Aleister Crowley, not people who are just restless and out to have a good time, young teenagers just, tired of being told what to do and want to be a little rebellious. Nothing wrong with that. They just kids will be kids, boys will be boys, and these things will happen. No, there is an entity behind it, a person behind it who was being influenced by Satan himself and pushing this on our youth back in those days when the whole hippie revolution began. It was this man who was the forerunner, who was laying the foundation. He had these ideas in mind when he was doing it. It was not by accident.
Crowley was to implement the satanic new age of Antichrist. He knew, like Hitler, he would have to go after the impressionable youth to succeed. Crowley declared, "Let me seduce the boys of England, and the oldsters may totter, unconverted to their graves. Then these boys, become men, may bring about the new heaven and the new earth. But without an army, I am useless. Give me my army, young men, and we will sweep these dogs into the sea."
So again, what's he doing? That's what I was talking about, some of the filthy things that this man was about. He was a pedophile, and he claimed, whether it's true or not, to have sacrificed children, and the people of Italy ran him out of their country and said, they didn't want anything to do with this wicked and evil man. But yeah, he was a known, openly admitted pedophile. He went after children. That's what he means when he says seduce. He wants to seduce boys. That's what he wanted to do. And he did that through Satan worship, through drug use, through the use of alcohol and drunkenness, and through, as we're going to see, this seduction came through music, turning people away from Christianity and towards evil.
Crowley's new age of Antichrist consisted of many points for implementation if it was to succeed. Crowley taught the need for the acceptance of the credo of the new eon. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law.
So you have to remember this as we go along too. This is what he said must happen with his army of youth, right? That's what he said. If I don't have a bunch of young people that I can influence, I'm worthless. But if I have an army of young people, I can bring this into the world, and the evil plan will succeed. But people have to accept this one thing, especially do what thou wilt, which became do your own thing. So his his words in the book of the law says this is the whole law right here. This sums up the whole law. Do what thou wilt. In other words, do what you want to do. How many songs do you hear out there? How many times do you hear even people today just say it? Even young kids, you know, I'm going to do what I want to do. This is what the songs say. It's your thing. Do what you want to do. All right, that's from Aleister Crowley. Do what thou wilt. Do your own will. Do what you want to do, which became and morphed into do your own thing. And then if that takes place, we will have a drug revolution, we'll have a sexual revolution, and this antichrist spirit will take over. That was the idea from this man. So remember that. Do what thou wilt. We'll see that in the coming little bit today, but more in the coming weeks also.
In the 1960s, this became do your own thing. As we have seen, this also incorporated the idea of the drug revolution, but Crowley did not stop there. He also called for a sexual revolution. Crowley also taught the need for the synthesis of Western occultism and Eastern mysticism. He taught that there was to be rebellion against all established authority, especially Christianity. He also taught the establishment of the New World Order under the Antichrist.
So, pretty amazing how he wanted to bring about the New World Order under the Antichrist. Again, what is that? It's laid out for us in the book of Revelation. Rebelling against all authority, especially Christianity. And he wanted to bring together Western occultism and Eastern mysticism. That was his plan. And where did he get it from? From the devil. And so it's amazing to see what this man was all about. But what's more amazing is to see that people are not ashamed to identify themselves with this man. And we're going to see again, want to take a look at the Beatles once again, because they are a big part of why our society looks the way that it does today. And I want to bring up something that we saw a bit of, but I want to look a little more at the Beatles. We saw
1964, rock's most popular group of all time came singing "I Want to Hold Your Hand." And after the world's youth gave their hand to them, they took them on a journey into drugs, permissive sex, Eastern mysticism, and Satanism.
When the Beatles came around, everybody freaked. They just loved the look. They loved the music.
I remember this from last week. Tommy Hilfiger, Justin Timberlake, Ricky Martin, and and Sinead O'Connor, a bunch of people talking about the influence that the Beatles had on their youth as they were growing up, right? They're saying this had this impact on us while we were growing up. They changed everything. If y'all remember that from last week's video.
We have already noted that John Lennon summed up the Beatle revolution when he quoted Lester Crowley and said that the whole Beatle idea was, quote, do what thou wilt.
So again, if you caught what he just said, John Lennon summed up the whole Beatle ideology with the words of Aleister Crowley, do what thou wilt. That's what John Lennon was about. That's what the Beatles were about. That's what he wanted to influence the world around him to do. And again, we saw much of this all those practices that are not Christian, but bring them over to the U.S. and bring them together, synthesize Western mysticism with Eastern mysticism. The Beatles were a huge part of making that happen.
It was through the influence of the Beatles that millions of youth around the world were almost overnight turned away from Christ to the gurus of the East. Gurus like the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi were given a platform to pass out mantras like candy to the youth. Hippie youth began repeating these mantras, believing that they were in some way scientific, when in fact they were calling out on the names of Hindu gods and demons. Yoga is actually a word that means to yoke and speaks of yoking with pagan gods. God's word warns that these false gods are actually demonic beings, and Jesus Christ warned against the repetitious praying of the pagans.
Well, before the Beatles came around, I don't think Indian spirituality and things like that were an everyday part of Western culture. It was entirely the hippies, you know.
See, why do you see Americans doing yoga? No accident. It's the devil put that in Buddhism and Hinduism and had the people practicing that and worshiping demons, thinking they were worshiping gods. He affected Aleister Crowley. Aleister Crowley wanted to get in touch with Satan, so that's what he did. Satan wrote through him and channeled words through him to write in his book. And the influence came through the Beatles. Like the Beatles they showed up wearing suits, right, with ties and, you know, looking kind of like the all-American boy, although they weren't American, but that's how they showed up. And the next thing you know, they look like totally different. They look like hippies. And why they went to India and they got linked up with this Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, and he taught them all of the practices of Hinduism and Buddhism, and the Beatles were huge, so they brought that to the United States. And when the world saw them doing it, then the United States people, the youth, they started doing it too. They said, this is really cool, you know, this is a different way of looking at spirituality instead of Christianity. But that wasn't taking place before the Beatles. They say, why the Beatles and why Aleister Crowley? We'll see that here in a moment.
Thanks to the Beatles, who decided to, you know, go to India and, you know, discover yoga and meditation. Now we all have yoga on every corner. You know, there was never anything like that before they came along.
They really wanted a spiritual revolution, a transformation.
It was time for a generation to assert themselves. And this is the revolution that the Beatles caused.
This revolution was challenged after John Lennon claimed to be more popular than Jesus Christ. This was a wake-up call to many young people around the world as they took to the streets and publicly destroyed their Beatle albums.
Don't you forget what the Beatles have said. Don't forget to take your Beatle records and your Beatle paraphernalia to any one of our 14 pickup points.
Sadly, this wake-up call did not last very long, as society at large fell back asleep, and the Beatles would launch their next assault with Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. John Lennon couldn't have made it any clearer when speaking of the Beatles' success and stating, quote, "I sold my soul to the devil."
So again, it's like last week we saw the clip from Katy Perry that she said, you know, she knew or she wanted to be a Christian singer, but she sold her soul to the devil. And here John Lennon says he sold his soul to the devil. He said that's where he got his musical genius. And that's where he got his success. Just like Satan came to Jesus and tempted him, saying, I'll give you all these things. Look over the mountainside here, and you can see all the splendor of the world. I'll give it to you if you'll bow down and worship me. And Jesus said to worship the Lord your God in him only. But John Lennon and many others have made good on that offer with the devil. They've decided to bow down to him.
Yoko Ono also made a pact with Satan for Lennon and herself not long before Lennon's death. Albert Goldman reported in his book, The Lives of John Lennon, quote, "Finally, it was time to consummate all these spells by making a living sacrifice and signing a pact with the devil. For Lena was not a white witch. She was the real thing, a practitioner of black magic. There was no knowing what she planned to do to seal the bond with Lucifer. All she would say was that a witch's moon was nigh and they had to make ready for the sacrifice." Lena said, quote, "We've got to make a sacrifice with the blood of an innocent to the one who has the power." They sacrificed an animal to Satan, and Yoko ended up paying the Satanist $60,000. The price, though, would be far more for serving Satan. It would cost John Lennon his life and his soul. Yoko Ono said of the Beatles, quote, "Something did happen there. It was as if several people gathered around a table and a ghost appeared. It was that kind of communication. So they were like mediums in a way. It was more than 4 people. As I said, they were like mediums. They weren't conscious of all they were saying, but it was coming through them." In his book, Spaniard in the Works, John Lennon portrayed Jesus Christ.
So I really, really don't want to play this next part, but I'm just going to play it because it's deeply offensive if you love Jesus. But to see what kind of person this man really was. And, people always want to paint him as this peace-loving, mild-mannered, just loving kind of guy that, loved people, loved the world, but hated Jesus, though. Okay, this is blasphemous, and it'll hurt your heart. And he says more, but I'm not going to play all that he says. But I just want people to see, okay, what did he say about Jesus, this kind, mild-mannered, loving man who, would never hurt a fly, but apparently he hates Jesus with all of his heart. So hard to listen to, but I think it's necessary so we can understand. If people say that this was a great man, that, okay, if you say he's a great man, then at least know what he was all about.
Christ as a, quote, "garlic-eating, stinking, little, yellow, greasy, fastest blank Catholic Spaniard," end quote.
So that's what John Lennon said about Jesus. And no need to comment on that. It's just disgusting. But I want people to realize, okay, this is this man who so many people worship. Quite literally worship.
When Lennon tried to defend his boasting that he was more popular than Jesus, he stated,
"I think as Beatles, as though those other Beatles, like other people say it, I just said they are having more influence on kids and things than anything else, including Jesus."
Lennon, though, said much more when you look at his comment in total. Quote, "Christianity will go. It will vanish and shrink. I needn't argue that. I'm right and I will be proven right. We're more popular than Jesus now."
So again, he claimed that Christianity was going to go and that the Beatles were more popular than Jesus. And all I can say about that is my kids know who Jesus is. They don't know who John Lennon is. So he was proven dreadfully, terribly wrong. And it's sad that his soul was destroyed because he was fallen, because he gave himself over to deception.
John Lennon described the frightening experiences which he had that sound much like classical demonic possession to the Beatles' official biographer, Hunter Davies. Lennon stated, quote, "If I'm on my own for 3 days doing nothing, I almost leave myself completely. I can see my hands and realize they're moving, but it's a robot that's doing it. It's frightening, really." He went on to state also, quote, "I felt like a hollow temple filled with many spirits, each one passing through me, each inhabiting me a little time, and then leaving to be replaced by another spirit." As Neil Young sang, there truly is more to the picture than meets the eye in the rock and roll industry. Satan is clearly using rock musicians as his pawns to advance his kingdom. According to rock critic Albert Goldman, these so-called sub-personalities that use Lennon's body, quote, "manifested themselves vividly in his music," end quote. In John Lennon's song, Number 9, Dream, he sings about being in contact with the spirit world and magic being in the air and music touching his soul like a river of sound. He talks about hearing their voices, and then something strange happens in the song. You hear something that sounds backwards. Then when turned around, you hear what it represents, the voices of the spirits saying, "John, John. John Lennon said, quote, "But my joy is when you're like possessed, like a medium. You know, I'll be sitting around and it'll come in the middle of the night or at a time when you don't want to do it. That's the exciting part. I don't know who the blank wrote it. I'm just sitting here and the whole blank song comes out. So you're like driven and you find yourself over on a piano or a guitar and you put it down because it's been given to you or whatever it is you tune into. We must be honest and ask ourselves a question. When we allow ourselves to be moved by music of bands like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, who are we really allowing to move us?"
So when we hear these songs from the Beatles and people like that, who are we really, really allowing to move us? Again, people still listen to John Lennon. I know if I was not saved, I guarantee you I'd still be listening to John Lennon. I absolutely loved his music when I was growing up. And I guarantee you his music is played everywhere. But not only that, though, the whole movement of rock and roll and even pop, any kind of music really that's around today, the musicians, all of them have been influenced by this man, by his music, like those clips that we looked at earlier, last week. And also we saw a little bit earlier, they're talking about the influence, the impact that these people, that the Beatles had on them. And what's John Lennon saying, you know, how did the music come to him? How did the words, the lyrics come to him? He said it was through possession. You know, I don't even know, he says he didn't even know who wrote it. He said, I don't know who wrote it, but basically he's saying it wasn't him. It came from an outside source, and we know what that source is. Unfortunately, it was the devil, and sad, but this is what this man gave himself to. And one day he was walking to his apartment without a care in the world, maybe, I don't know, but the next instant he was in eternity because a man ran up and shot him, and he probably never knew what hit him, and may very well have been dead before he hit the ground, and he was in eternity. And all those things that he said, now he's going to have to stand and give an account for it, and to lead people to destruction, he's going to stand before a holy God and give an account for his soul. Just as it says in Mark 8:36 and 37, what will it profit a man if he gains the world and loses his soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul? Again, the devil puts this offer on the table, and some people are willing to give themselves to it. Now, I want to look at just a picture really quickly to see some insight into the Beatles. So this is the album cover of the Beatles. After that whole John Lennon came out and said the Beatles are more popular than Jesus, and everybody got angry and they said, no, we're not gonna listen to this anymore. They started burning their albums, and the radio stations were saying, John Lennon said this, and you know, we don't agree with that. We don't want that in our country. Come burn your records. It didn't last long. They came out with their next album. This is called Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. This is their album. This is the Beatles album. It says right here, Sgt. Pepper's here, Lonely Hearts Club Band. And that's the name of the album. And this is the Beatles right here, this little flower bed. So this is their album. And here you have the Beatles, all four of them right here in the front. And then here it says all the people that have influenced them, all the people who they think are great men who have influenced them along the way. And who do you see in the midst right over here? Aleister Crowley. And here is his face made large for us to see, but he's here in the corner placed with all these other people who they say are great people. That's why they're on the album cover. These are the ones who influenced us. The man called the Great Beast 666 and dubbed by the press the wickedest man in the world. So if you wonder why I'm saying, well, why are we talking about the Beatles and Aleister Crowley? Well, this is one big reason why, because he influenced them. They liked his writings, they read his books, and they agreed with what he had to say. This disgusting human being and the disgusting things that he did and practiced, they didn't shun it. They didn't think, hey, this is really disgusting and terrible and horrible. They said, yeah, this is a good idea. This is what I want to do. That's the Beatles. And that's John Lennon and Ringo Starr and George Harrison and McCartney. That's who the Beatles are. Not some great legendary band who we should all love and introduce our kids to. And I'm so glad the Lord was merciful upon me and saved me out of this deception, because I know beyond any shadow of a doubt, as much as I loved music, as much as I loved old music, that I already would have introduced my kids to all of these bands, including the Beatles. So there he is on the cover. They're not afraid to associate themselves with Aleister Crowley. Now, I want to look at one last sort of a series of clips, and then we'll wrap this up. But we want to look at this idea of somebody selling their soul in the first place, and where did it come from, and is there anything besides what we've already seen? I think we've seen enough evidence to say this is real. But I want to look at another man who was the originator of everything that we're talking about as far as when it comes to music. Music and the influence that is in our world today. To play guitar, if you learn the blues, then you can learn to play anything. The blues is, again, the bedrock. It's the foundation. If you learn to play the blues, you can learn to play any other kind of music. And so this man named Robert Johnson was somebody who wanted to play blues but wasn't any good at it. And so we're going to see how the story goes with his life. The first thing we're going to look at, the first clip we're going to look at, is going to be from a movie about his life. And then eventually we're going to get to people actually talking about him, people who actually knew him. We're going to look at that. And then we're going to see a few people who he affected, and we'll finish up with that. This is about Robert Johnson.
You folks going past Tishomingo?
Sure, hop in.
Thanks for the lift, sir. My name's Tommy Johnson.
How you doing, Tommy? Say, I haven't seen a house out here for miles. What are you doing out in the middle of nowhere?
Well, I had to be at that there crossroads last midnight. Sell my soul to the devil.
This ain't no laughing matter, Everett.
What'd the devil give you for your soul, Tommy?
Well, he taught me to play this here guitar real good.
Oh, son. For that, you traded your everlasting soul?
Well, I wouldn't use it.
Fell down on my knees. Holy. Guess again.
I want to play guitar. I want you to make me the best blues man ever lived.
So there it goes from the depiction of Robert Johnson in first a movie, Oh Brother Where Art Thou, and then a TV show it's on basic cable. If you want to watch it, any kid can turn it on and watch it if they have basic cable. If they would have been watchers of that show, they could have come across that and just seen that. But then you cut to Bob Dylan and Eric Clapton performing Crossroad Blues, which is a song that Robert Johnson sang, where he talked about what they say there in that song that short little clip. They say went down to the crossroads, got down on my knees. And so they're talking about what was depicted there. They're talking about what took place in his life, that he sold his soul at the crossroads. And we're going to see
Robert Johnson is considered the king of the Delta blues. He's also considered the father of rock and roll. It is very significant that Johnson would be considered the father of rock and roll, as it is alleged that he had sold his soul to Satan in Clarksdale, Mississippi, in exchange for guitar playing abilities and worldwide fame.
I went to the crossroads.
It was after Johnson made his alleged pact with Satan that he became the king of the Delta blues. Blues master B.B. King said, quote, "As a musician, Robert Johnson had it all."
I think he's the greatest folk blues guitar player that ever lived, and the greatest singer, the greatest writer.
You know, you think you were getting a handle on playing the blues, and then to hear Johnson say, "Whoa, there's a long way to go yet."
Blues master and Johnson's mentor, Son House, said of him before Johnson's transformation, "He'd sit at our feet and play during the break, and such another racket you've never heard." Son House said he made the audiences mad with his racket. Son House went on to say of Johnson before he made his alleged pact with Satan that he was a talentless and even an irritating guitar player.
But he followed me and Willie around on Saturday night, Willie Brown. And every time we stopped for rest and sit at a little guitar over in the corner or something and go out to catch air, get the guitar and be trying to play it and be just noising the people, And the folks would come out and say, "Why don't some of y'all go in there and meet that boy, put that thing down, he running us crazy." Finally, he left, he run off from his father and mother. And he went over in Arkansas or something. He was gone about 6 to 8 months.
It was during this period of 6 to 8 months that it is said that he made his pact with Satan on the crossroads of Highway 49 and 61 in Clarksdale, Mississippi. It was at these crossroads where the legendary experiences of Johnson trading in his eternal soul for temporary fame was said to have taken place in Clarksdale, Mississippi.
Well, they say he sold himself to the devil. That's what they say.
After Johnson's alleged pact with Satan, everything changed as Johnson went from being the worst blues guitarist in a matter of months to the best. Some musicians who knew Johnson claimed that Johnson himself admitted that he sold his soul to Satan.
He said he done that with the crossroads.
Son House said that when Johnson returned after 6 to 8 months, everything changed as Johnson was transformed almost before their very eyes.
Then he come back. When he come back, me and Willie Brown was playing out there, and he walked in. He said, can I hit a look at you? I said, nah, don't come back with that, Robert. I said, you know that people don't want to hear that racket. He said, let them say what they want to say. I want you to see what I learned.
Son House said when he finished, all of our mouths were standing open. They couldn't believe what they were hearing. Son House declared emphatically, quote, he sold his soul to the devil to play like that. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has stated that Robert Johnson's songs are, quote, the bedrock upon which modern blues and rock and roll were built. He's not only declared to be the father of rock and roll, but the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame says that Robert Johnson stands at the crossroads of American music, much as a popular folk legend has it. He once stood at Mississippi Crossroads and sold his soul to the devil in exchange for guitar-playing powers. Incredibly, Robert Johnson went from a guitarist who couldn't play a lick in a matter of months to a guitarist who, like a medium, didn't even have to practice as he channeled music from the spirit world at will.
I never seen him have to practice anything like that. Never seen him sit down and learn a song. He already knew it. Once he attempted to play it, he knew it. He had a built-in computer. Everything he heard was there. All they had to do was punch the button.
Whether or not the crossroads of Highway 49 and 61 are the exact place that Robert Johnson sold his soul, we cannot know for sure. But one thing is clear, Johnson had indeed given his soul to Satan. This is brought out in his own lyrics, which testify to this.
Early this morning, he knocked upon my door, and I said, hello, Satan, I believe it's time to go. Me and the devil was walking side by side. Me and the devil was walking side by side.
So there you see, he was somebody who had no skills whatsoever when it came to playing the guitar, and he disappeared for a little while. And all of a sudden, a few months, they say, and then he comes back and he's this incredible guitar player. And as that one guy said, you know, after he comes back from the crossroads, he never had to sit down and learn a song. It was just there. It was just, again, channeled to him through these entities, and he was just able to play anything, anytime he wanted. And he influenced people along the way. Again, you saw Eric Clapton and Bob Dylan talking about or singing his song about going down to the crossroads themselves. And I want to finish up with this final clip from Bob Dylan. See what he said in 2004. This is a 60 Minutes interview again. Some kid was watching a football game and with their dad, and the game ended, and dad just kept the 60 Minutes on, and could have came across this, could have very easily come across this interview, and dad saying, oh man, I love Bob Dylan growing up. I'm gonna go ahead and watch this. And the son or daughter sits there and hears this. I mean, again, this is basic television. It's not anything that's you have to, go and pay extra for. It's not, these other channels that back in those days you had to pay extra to see these more sort of R-rated, deeper, heavier kind of things. And now this is just basic cable that this appeared on. But this is Bob Dylan, and we'll finish with these words from him. And
ever look at music that you've written and look back at it and say, whoa, that surprised me?
I used to. I don't do that anymore. I don't know how I got to write those songs.
What do you mean you don't know how?
Well, those early songs were like almost magically written. Darkness at the break of noon, shadows even the silver spoon, a handmade blade, a child's balloon. Try to sit down and write something like that. There's a magic to that. And it's not Siegfried and Roy kind of magic, it's a different kind of a penetrating magic.
Again, remember, that's why I told you one reason early on when we began this video to remember that word magic. That's what he's talking about here. He's not going into all the details, but it's obvious what he's talking about, a certain kind of magic, the same magic that came to Robert Johnson, the same kind that came to the Beatles later after that and on down the line. He said he didn't write the songs, came to him through magic.
And I did it. I did it at one time.
You don't think you can do it today?
Mm-mm.
Why do you still do it? Why are you still out here?
Well, it goes back to the destiny thing. I made a bargain with it, a long time ago, and I'm holding up my end.
What was your bargain?
To get where I am now.
Should I ask who you made the bargain with?
with the chief commander.
On this earth?
And on this earth, and then in the world we can't see.
Now the question that.
So that's pretty amazing to think about, the fact that Bob Dylan says that he made a bargain with something, and that's why he continues to sing and go and do the things that he does to this day, because he made a bargain with it and he's holding up his end. And what's the bargain, to get what he wanted, to get to where he is. And he says, he made a deal with what, the chief commander. And he said, the man said, should I ask who you made the bargain with? And he says, the chief commander, and he says, of this world? He says, of this world and a world you can't see. So there he says it again on basic cable for the world to see on 60 Minutes of all places, and not afraid to say it. So again, I'll say the same thing for Bob Dylan that I said for the Beatles and for John Lennon. Absolutely loved the music of Bob Dylan, and the others who were mentioned, and many more who looked to Crowley and the things that he taught and gave their soul away. Whether you can really sell your soul is another matter. Your soul belongs to God. You can't sell it anyway. It doesn't belong to you for you to sell. If any of these people would repent and turn to Jesus, they could find salvation in him. But they're giving themselves over to the darkness of this world, and that's what they've chosen to do. And you see, even to right now, you see do what thou wilt, the satanic mandate. It's no different in our world today. This is still alive and well. Jay-Z, you can't hardly turn on the television without seeing or hearing about Jay-Z. He's part of the NFL. He's at all the basketball games. He's famous. He's married to Beyonce. He's, all the music stuff. He's, again, huge influence on the world. Remember what Aleister Crowley said, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. This is do what thou wilt, the satanic mandate. Anton LaVey, the founder of the Satanic Church, was a part of that with the serpent on his shoulder. And the Beatles, the whole Beatles idea was to do what you want, do what you will, as long as it doesn't hurt somebody, John Lennon said. And here you have Jay-Z with his hoodie, do what thou wilt. That's all it says, do what thou wilt. It's amazing and sad, but if we want to avoid these things, and we need and realize how wicked the world is and the things that they're doing, we need to run to the Lord and run to his word. James 1:17 says, every good and every perfect gift is from above and comes down from the Father of light, with whom there is no variation or shadow of turning. So if you want good in your life, avoid this secular music. And, I'm talking about old musicians because it started there, but it's not like I can't point at new musicians that are coming out and say the exact same thing about every single one of them that I'm aware of. that they all are influenced by this wicked man and through this type of wickedness, this evil, because again, it's passed down through people like the Beatles. But if you're not aware of what's being fed to you, you can easily overlook it and not realize it, because it's packaged in music that sounds beautiful to the undiscerning heart, to the eyes and the ears of the people. It's like, man, this is awesome music, you know. The Beatles, John Lennon, Imagine, you know, the Crossroads with all the beautiful guitar riffs that make people get excited about the guitar. And you know, like a Rolling Stone, Bob Dylan, famous song of his that, you know, most people alive today have heard that song and many other songs, and they're out there still penetrating the hearts of people. But it doesn't come from above. Every good and perfect gift is from above. So the music we listen to, the things we see, we need to make sure they're from above, not from this evil, satanic world that's given over to the world and worldliness. So it's been an hour and 15 minutes, so I'll end there. I hope that opened our eyes to some things, and there's much, much, much more to see regarding this and how this does influence people. The ones who talk about it are the ones who are out there doing it. They know they influence people. It's their desire to influence people. But I don't think they understand that. I don't think they necessarily understand that. In fact, I could say I know that they don't understand that the influence is going to sexualize people, the youth, and they're going to grow up to be sexualized and evil. And that leads to depression. You know, that lifestyle of sexual promiscuity, that lifestyle of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, that lifestyle of anti-Christian, anti-God sentiment leads to depression. It leaves people empty and depressed. And so that is how all these things are connected. And that's why I say I'm thoroughly convinced that if people are listening to this music, they need to be aware of this. If you know somebody who says this stuff is no big deal, share it with them. Share part of it with them. Just show them. That's why I'm doing this, so that we can share it with other people, even if it's just a portion of it. Say, you know, maybe you should think twice before listening to that and introducing your kids and your grandkids to that. That's my hope, that we'll understand that these things affect us. And, you know, if we have a desire to still hear secular music, that we lay that down and realize that there's evil behind it, and it's not innocent and it's not harmless. So thank y'all for staying with me this long. Y'all have a great night, and I pray that God blesses y'all. We'll see y'all next time.